Have you ever wondered how we went from this to this? What exactly were the changes we underwent to get here? And what roles are video games having on society today? And furthermore, where do video games fit in the greater story of human history? Are they just a novelty and distraction? Or are they having important effects on culture that we may not be noticing? The first port of call is of course the graphic violence portrayed in modern video games. But the truth is that as a society we expose ourselves to simulated violence routinely and for fun. Yet we can't ignore the influence video games have on society. You could even argue it is the defining zeitgeist of our era. But some of the deepest thought about what's happening and where we're going is not bubbling through to the mainstream. In this video we will explore two ideas that we feel are possibly being missed out on. 1. How important games, including video games, are to learning and the transfer of knowledge, and how this is mirrored in the context of evolution and human development. And 2. Why we should perhaps exert caution when teaching computers how to play video games. Before we get into all that, let's consider where video games fit into the greater anthropological story. Are they just for fun, or is there something beneath the surface that we're not seeing? To answer that question, we have to go way back to the beginning of all culture, to the genesis of our species. At some point in time, our pre-human ancestors would have evolved to something called causal understanding. Species like the common crow even possess limited causal understanding. Here the crow shows that it understands that if it places a rock in the water level will rise and it will get the tree displayed here in red. Causal understanding is important because it opens up the possibility of understanding others as social agents, individuals with their own goals and wishes. The big question is, how did we get here? A commonality that is thought to play a role in this is the development of religion. Most, if not all cultures, share some kind of belief system that invoke forces beyond our own being to explain what happens here on Earth. We know them as religions, and this is why some events are called active gods. It has been argued that religions likely predate human language. There's even evidence of ritualistic, religious-like behaviour in animals, like elephants and dolphins. Here you can see elephants congregating around the carcass of a young elephant that passed away a few weeks earlier. This behaviour is unique among only a subset of animals, and is thought to be indicative of their ability to recognise themselves, both as individuals and as part of a group. Cro-Magnon men and Neanderthals are also thought to have exhibited this proto-religious or religious behaviour. Now, you're probably quite fairly asking what religion has to do with video games. Well, the ability to link causal sequences of events with the physical here and now of life and death allows for something called abstract thinking, which in turn allows for the birth of narrative thinking. Furthermore, this sets the stage for organisms to view themselves and their fellow creatures as intentional agents. This is a huge part of what makes us human, because it opens up the potential for something called a joint attentional scene. Remember that phrase, because we're going to come back to it later in the video. This is where it starts to get interesting, because this is about the time games start to become a thing. The ability of organisms to understand each other as intentional agents allow for the development of symbolic communication, starting with gesturing and vocalization, and then developing into spoken language, with the birth of media and likely games coming next. The earliest example we have of this is the Royal Game of Ur, dating from about 3000 BC. Keep in mind that's only 5,000 years ago, so we've developed video games from this in 5,000 years. That's only about 70 human lifespans. This proposed side-by-side development of narrative, language, understanding oneself and others as intentional agents, and participation in games is the exact same development we see in toddlers and children. Anyone who has any experience with children knows that until about 9 months of age, they have a fairly limited ability for attention and a really limited understanding of how the world works. But at 9 months, a magical switch is turned on. Just around this time, a baby starts to recognize when they have their parent's attention, and in turn starts to mimic their parent and following the parent's gaze. Within another 6 months, the baby has usually followed this behaviour so closely that they're able to predict the mind state of others and use that ability as a manipulation tool.
Give me an eye. Dad, you will get yours. And no, I won't. You wouldn't. I wouldn't be a friend then. Okay. Oh, stick the whole thing.
Things snowball pretty quickly from here. That being said, until the age of about 9 months, human infants' conceptualization of others within their species matches that of adult non-human primates. The theory here is that this cognitive leap, which happens for children at 9 to 15 months after birth, happened for our species in relatively recent evolutionary time, the last 250,000 years or so. And the bulk of human achievement has really happened in the last 50,000 years. This leap has happened due to the communicative cultural tasks that make up the bulk of human achievement. It is the basis of sharing, negotiating, learning, and symbolic communication. This brings us back to the term we used earlier, the joint attentional scene. A joint attentional scene involves two people, such as a parent and child, both understanding what the other is attending to. For most of us, our first memory is that of a joint attentional scene between a parent and a child, the exchanging of gestures, sounds, or looks, such that both individuals recognize the purpose and connectiveness of their actions. Anybody who has ever raised a child will tell you, once a child achieves this ability, their learning and knowledge explodes exponentially. Michael Tomasello, an American developmental psychologist, believes that once our ancestors achieved this ability, the possibility for cultural breakthroughs increased exponentially.
Recently, people have started talking about shared intentionality. That is, that you and I can have a shared goal, something we want to accomplish together. And we can have joint attention to something. So we both know that we're attending to this book in front of us, and not only am I attending to it and you're attending to it, I know you're attending to it, and I know you're attending to me attending to it. So we really are jointly, we know, we're mutually aware that we're attending to it. And this joint goals and joint attention structures much of human activity and much of human communication. And so we start doing things in this we or group way. One of the things that I've emphasized a lot is that, as a way of kind of crystallizing the argument, is that I believe that if you had a human baby and it grew up outside of any human contact on some desert island somewhere, somehow magically getting food, that as an adult, that child's cognitive skills would not be very different from those of other apes, virtually identical. Mm-hmm. But when you're in a culture, next thing you know, we're doing algebra and calculus because we can learn from things that other people have invented.
Put into this evolutionary context, we can now start to figure out the real purpose of games. Why do we really play them? Why are they even fun? They often involve routine tasks and chores. Despite this, playing seems to be in our nature. We do it for the pleasure of exploring our own minds and exploring the world in ways that aren't really directly linked to our survival. Some prominent academics, who are linked below, would propose that it is this very characteristic that defines us as a species, and is what our society is built upon. This ideology basically puts forth games as driving and co-evolving with the development of language, leading to the development of more elaborate technology and intergenerational transfer of knowledge and culture. So here we are in 2018, with networked multimedia sharing like YouTube, facilitating the exchange of ideas and information across oceans, continents and state lines, and the continued growth and evolution of video games drawn on millennia of societal conventions. The reason these games are so important is that they are a form of pattern abstraction that has served us well over thousands of years. They are a means of divorcing behaviours and symbols from the real world and of passing down knowledge and culture. Moreover, the modern computer is the highest mass-use throughput medium for pattern forming ever. We have only begun to get sneak peeks at the potential of what we can do with these machines. These machines are more than just novelty or tools. They are the cognitive scaffolds that will help us to organise and advance the traditions of thinking that we have built our societies upon. Keeping in mind the important role games play in the development of language and inheritance of knowledge at both the species and individual level, we should not be surprised if they end up playing a key role in the further development of our species, perhaps by expanding the rate of learning through offering new, novel and engaging learning experiences. It's also worth noting that the computer has now evolved into the medium of discourse. There's more going on here. We use it as a way to facilitate joint attentional scenes between humans, but it could also be argued that it is the machine whose attention we are now sharing, and perhaps there is an aspect of unintentional biomimicry happening here. At this point in history, we are cultivating not only our own cognition, but possibly priming the primitive cognition of the computer. It's hard to ignore the parallel with human development here. Just as games led us away from our primate cousins and into the rich, meaningful human world of symbolic culture, they may now be leading us into a new, strange connectiveness with the machine world. The question on everybody's mind, of course, is whether the future is filled with conscious AI waiting to be born. Maybe just as our species' cognition was and still is awakened through play, as will computers. That being said, although computers and their programs screw up way more often than we would like, they never do it for fun. But if computers move away from being able to play games, which they can arguably already kind of do, to designing things by themselves, and then competing against each other for some kind of reward, then perhaps the door could be open to AI with their own manner of self-awareness. We're obviously not there yet, but that doesn't mean that we should proceed without being cognizant of this information. It could even be argued that we are finding ourselves at the dawn of a new era of knowledge and learning due to the effects that network computing and gaming are having on our cognition and metacognition. Furthermore, we should not ignore the effect games and gaming have had on our development as a species and the huge effect they will continue to have. Thank you for watching the video today. We'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. And as always, if you'd like to support the channel, please feel free to like and subscribe.